Welcome to the From There to Here podcast, where we talk to people in the public eye about their journey through life, the triumphs, the disasters, and how they've met those two imposters along the way. We want our interviews to be interesting and entertaining. We want also, however, to encourage people who are finding life tough at the moment to reach out for help to family, to friends, and to the many great organisations working in this space, some of which are featured on our website. At the time of recording, I'm starting to look forward to the Edinburgh Festival, which I visit every year I can. Last year, I saw 30-odd shows, and one that stood out to me, and not just me, it was named one of the 5 best shows to see by the Scotsman, was an adequate abridgment of boarding school life as a homo. Tender, moving, powerful, often very funny, and yet with an important story to tell, it has, since Edinburgh 24, played to packed houses in London, Bristol and Manchester, and returns to Edinburgh Festival 25 to play a much bigger venue. The writer, actor and producer is Ned Blackburn, who joins me today. Welcome, Ned.
Hi.
How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Excellent. Lovely to have you with us. Very keen to talk all about the play and return to Edinburgh and indeed how you got to Edinburgh in the first place, all of that. But obviously we talk about people's journey through life. So perhaps we can just ask you to introduce your early family life in a reference you're almost certainly too young to recognise. Who are you and where do you come from?
Brilliant. Well, I'll give it a go. Yeah, so I was born in London and moved to Hampshire when I was about 10, and I went to a all-boys boarding school from 13 to 18 and did lots of drama while I was there. And then I left and went to study at the University of Manchester, which I have just graduated from about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so boarding school from 13, what was it like? What was good? What was bad?
I remember initially being really excited about going. I thought it was going to be like a sort of holiday camp. So you can sort of imagine like amazing facilities and grounds, and felt like a bit of a big sleepover at first. Around the sort of first or second year, I started to become develop early teen anxieties. And I think quite a lot of that was surrounding sexuality. And so I just encountered a little bit of fear sometimes at the school. I don't think that anyone can necessarily say that they fully loved or fully hated school. I think that it's a very up and down journey, and you meet people when they're at their absolute worst at school a lot of the time, and you yourself are often at your absolute worst. But yeah, I think, that's how I would describe it, is just sort of smatterings of a bit of fear sometimes, and that's quite natural, and fear of being different. But I think that one of the things that perpetrates that at school is that you arrive in the youngest year, and the older pupils are often quite mean and sort of pick on you. And it's never, it sways in levels of severity. Most of the time it's just sort of teasing. Obviously there's the brutaler side to it. But yeah, you just sort of quite quickly learn the hierarchy of a place. And I think what's interesting is when you grow up and you become those older pupils, what decisions do you make to be the same as that and treat people with the same vitriol often and macho behavior? Or do you choose to be different and be kinder? And I think that often that's a sort of cycle that you see at long-running schools in my last 2 years when lockdown and everything happened. And I really do think that had quite a big impact. And that was when I came out, and that was an interesting time to come back from the lockdown period, and had come out privately to close friends. And then somehow, and as I arrived back in my last year, everyone knew that I was gay. And it's a weird environment. I think it's always going to be a weird environment when, you've relatively come to terms with your identity and not going to sort of hide it anymore. But there's something quite extreme about the fact of everyone knowing, and everyone feeling that they can talk to you and make claims about you. So it's an interesting thing to navigate. I think that boarding schools in some ways have changed and in other ways completely haven't. And, obviously pastoral care has had to develop to some degrees, but I think that it won't properly develop until it is able to find real acceptance of that and accept that the body of students that they have at that school that are LGBT maybe don't conform to the gender ideals of the school and don't conform to that sort of typically like masculine ideals. And she can just be a bit more visible, I think, with acceptance of queer people, just allowing it to be a part of the school rather than something that they just try to ignore.
In my other life, I work in market research,
Mm.
and therefore know that these days around 11% of men will accept LGBT as the best definition of their sexuality.
Mm.
That is these days slightly more B than G, but it is 11%.
Mm.
Um, my and also it is more true among young people and more true at the higher end of the socioeconomic scale,
Mm.
i.e., at a boarding school. My guess is that you didn't see 11% of your schoolmates as out in LGBT.
No, I didn't. One of my best friends at school was also gay, and he was out relatively privately to me. So we had each other, and so I did feel that sense of support and in each other. This school was sort of 650 pupils at any one time, and of course, within that, you're going to have a huge number of people that are not heterosexual or gender non-conforming, and there was just no ability to sort of accept that as true and really dedicate some awareness to that in terms of
And
like.
what stops that? Is it that the school just ignores it? Is there any hostility to the concept from teachers, or is it just about the sort of macho way in which boys' schools operate with the kids?
I think it's a lot more individualistic than that. I think that there are some amazing teachers and at any school who are of course supportive and accepting of whoever the people in their classroom are. I think it comes from a general sense of these schools try to, I guess, remain like apolitical maybe or not seen to be imposing anything onto students, and so I think it just sort of swings towards that, well, we're just not going to get involved. I remember at school there was someone who tried to get in June. Someone tried to get the pride flag flown at the school above a sort of like clock tower, and it was just met with complete sort of this is in no way a possibility. And whilst I can sort of understand that perspective on it, of course it's a possibility and it should be a possibility. Why would it not be? Everywhere else in the world celebrates this often sort of quite performative flag flying. I just wish it was a bit more open and just a bit more talked about. And I just think that would alleviate some pressure off people who I know are grappling with identity in quite a prescriptive environment.
Okay, I know that people will want me to ask you what decision you took or what action you took when you became in the upper years. Did you become kinder, or did you go the other way? What did you do?
I would like to think I chose the route of kindness, mainly just because I'm so terrified of confrontation. Well, not mainly. I hope it's because, I'm a kind-hearted person. But I think that when I'd come out and, and it was sort of a little bit grey between I was outed and I came out. But when I sort of did start to feel a bit more confident, I did make some try and make some movements like within the school to speak to members of the like senior leadership team and talk about this, because there was this whole thing that had happened and it was centered around rumors, and some of this sort of plot feeds into the play, and it's based slightly on real events, slightly on my own imagination, and it was just about someone had been filmed in the shower because they were bullying someone else, and the person being bullied filmed him because he wanted him to stop bullying him. And that was obviously dealt with as its own sort of thing. But off the back of it came so much homophobia. And I remember, and this was so near to the end of my time at school. It happened in the summer, just before I was about to leave. And it was just such a horrible, hostile place to be. And I remember walking into like meal times and just feeling so many people staring at me. And, rumors went around, rumors that were centered around me. And that was, I think, the only time I really felt angry at the school, was that I felt that I had chosen the path of kindness and only, put out good things, and yet could so quickly be turned on in this way. I think it was just another sort of one of these things that happens at these elitist schools that are able to shroud themselves in a little bit of mystery, and so it can kind of just go on a bit unnoticed.
We'll talk more about the play because you make a lot of those points very effectively in the play. Just before we do that, you mentioned that you had spent quite a lot of time at school doing theatrical things. So tell us about how your passion for theatre, interest in theatre, and desire to, well, your actor, producer, director, writer. So we'll talk about all of that, but how your desire to get into that started and how it was developed at school.
Well, my mum was really theatery. She did a lot of Amdram when she was younger, and then she taught drama as part of her job as a teacher. So I was kind of always aware of it, and I found it quite young. I didn't think it was sort of something that was surprising. It was something that I really enjoyed doing as a young age, and did all the drama clubs and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, the secondary school, you were able to pursue it massively. They had an amazing drama department. And so I just quickly was able to, really like scratch that, like want to do it and be on stage. And it definitely did start with acting. But I also just sort of learned quite quickly that I really enjoyed putting on things off my sort of want to do them. And I liked the part of it that went into it, the logistics, the admin, and just, yeah, fitting all the pieces together. So I left school and I tried to go to drama school and I didn't get in, but instead I did a course at the Old Vic in London that was sort of every other weekend. And it was in theatre making, and it covered sort of acting, writing, producing, directing, basically everything. And it was amazing. And it just taught you how to develop skills to put things on in your own and quite tangibly pursue a career in theatre without necessarily having to go to a drama school or somewhere to really learn all of these skills. You could develop them purely by doing. And so when I went to Manchester University, I think I sought out that side of it and did a lot of producing of student stuff, was on the drama committee for the society. It's what I spent most of my time at university doing. And so my passion was kind of really just fostered by the society. I love being involved in theatre productions in any sort of way that I can.
So tell us a little bit about the play. I'm keen to encourage everybody to go and see it. It really is excellent.
So the play is called An Adequate Abridgement of Boarding School Life as a Homo, and it kind of does what it says on the tin. It is the perspective of boarding school from a young gay man's perspective. He's called Johnny, and he's in his last year of school. He's sort of outwardly closeted, but privately completely gay, and makes no qualms about that in how he interacts with the audience. And so, yeah, we follow him in his last year of school, and he meets Harry. Harry's on the rugby team, and they start a physical relationship that is purely physical, but it does not end completely well. And yeah, it's a mixture of different things that lots of people have seen before, whether that's sort of coming out stories, coming of age stories. We don't ever try and be boxed in by one of those categories and hold to any of those conventions or negative tropes. But it is familiar, that sense of getting a real sense for someone's life as they narrate you their story, and they're not always entirely trustworthy. But yeah, it hopes to be funny. That's always the main thing that we try to do. but the humour is often a little bit of a defense mechanism, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we don't try and make that out to be a bad thing, but beneath that humour, there's some cracks start to show.
And well, that's exactly what it is. It is very funny. It's very sweet, but it has a story to tell, and some of it is quite hard hitting. So I could not recommend it more warmly. When did you write it, Ned?
I left it pretty much straight, wrote it pretty much straight after I left school, because that was after the lockdowns, and I'd started writing plays in lockdowns, and they were quite outlandish. One of them was about as if Peter Pan was a drug dealer and was grooming children, and my drama teacher told me to write what you know, which was pretty great advice. And I remember sitting on the train and thinking, well, if I'm going to write what I know, this is probably the only story I have to tell. And yeah, so that was in its first draft in 2022, 2021, and I rewrote it after doing a lot of sketch comedy at uni, so 2 years later, and rewrote it as a two-man play. And that's sort of the version that we have of it now.
So the bulk of the story was written by a 16-year-old. That's what you're telling me.
Kind of. 18-year-old, yeah, kind of.
Sure. Okay. Well, it's incredible. Okay. So you've got it written. Did you? I mean, what were you writing it for? Did you imagine that it would be staged and it would attract an audience, or was it a academic exercise? What was in your mind when you wrote it?
I always wrote it for the Fringe. I knew that I wanted to go to the Edinburgh Fringe. I was obsessed with the Edinburgh Fringe at that point. And so I wrote something that I knew would fit that format. And I wrote enough challenges in for a sort of director to make it and take it in whatever form they wanted to, and shape it physically, but not too many that the set couldn't be packed into a car and performed on a tiny stage. Yeah, so I think I've always had that in mind.
Okay. So you've written this thing at 16, started at 16 with the idea that you would take it up to Edinburgh. Where did your passion for Edinburgh begin?
I first went when I was 15, but I do just remember sort of standing in what felt like just the biggest sea of creativity, and just that undiluted passion for it. I think I really picked up on, and that energy, because Edinburgh's a bit like a challenge, and it really is as a challenge for artists to see how much they can maintain their artistic integrity while working to fit all these problems. And yeah, I think I wrote a sort of extended a mini dissertation on it while I was still at school, and I just learned so much about how it had formed, and yeah, just sort of continued to be a little bit in awe of it.
And to anybody listening, it is the most amazing experience, just as an audience member, just to be surrounded by such creativity and such passion and enthusiasm for the work that people have done. And you walk down the Royal Mile and you get so many people trying to persuade you to go and see their play, and every one of them has got something to offer, and every one of them is passionate about what they do, and an awful lot of what you see is really, really good. So I do encourage people to think about going if you haven't had that experience before. So now let's get to practicalities. You've written a play. You want to take it to the Edinburgh Festival. Now what?
So I went to Manchester University, and as I said, sort of got involved with the Drama Society quite quickly there. And as with a lot of other sort of universities, there is quite a big culture of going to Edinburgh Fringe. And the first time I did it was in first year was with the sketch review team, which is sort of quite a classic way of going. And I worked with Meg, who directs the show now, alongside Josh. They direct it together. But Meg and I did the review together. And I loved I loved working with her. I loved her taste in comedy. And I loved being at the Fringe. Josh had read the script and had said, I love this. I want to direct this. I want to take it to Edinburgh. And I was enjoying working with Meg so much. So I think at that point, I was like, right, I've found people that I want to do this with now. And when you have that sort of want as a as a student. It does feel quite tangible getting to Edinburgh because lots of people were doing it and they would do a week run, which is what we initially did. I found a producer, Lizzie, who was in charge of the Drama Society when I was in first year, and she was just a powerhouse person on all sort of fronts. And I knew that her sort of motivation would get us there. So we put out a crowdfunder in around January, probably, and that raised about £1,800. And then we put some of our own money into getting a venue, and we got a venue by March, April. And weirdly, it was the most fitting venue ever. It was just the most atmospheric boarding school like room that you could ever find. I don't think we will ever perform in a venue more fitting for the show than there. And so yeah, and we were away, and we got the ball rolling with it. And it really is just the five of us. We don't have, we have advice and support by people who've taken stuff before, and some of us had already been. But it's just Edinburgh is a list of problems. It's the accommodation costs, the venue costs, the transport, how you're going to get everything everywhere, and all of these logistical things that are just completely separate to the show. How you're going to market it, where you're going to get your flyers from, who's going to design your poster, all of these logistical problems that before you even touch the show of like, is the show any good? And I think that's important, and that is the opportunity that we get when we go to Edinburgh, is to present it in front of people that you fly to, people that you meet in the street, people that happen across your show. That was one of the biggest tools that we had in selling well last summer, was that our title started with A, and so it meant that we were at the top of many brochures. And it is a catchy title. It's a stupid title that I always thought I would change, but it has served us quite well because it is a mini synopsis. And Meg designed a very eye-catching poster. We were in the big, massive brochure that on the Fringe and on the Fringe website and stuff that all shows are. But people saw the title and saw Homo, and it caught them and caught attention. And that is just such a happy coincidence of events, because none of us had the Fringe experience to sort of say, right, this is the right title, this is the right poster, we just were marketing the show as best we knew how. And it just worked. It worked in the Edinburgh environment, which is why that first run did go really well. And whether we can repeat that again this summer with the show, I don't know. Whether we could repeat that again with a completely different show, I don't know. But you do get a sense of Edinburgh each time you do it. So now this will be my sort of third Fringe, and it is like you learn the dynamic of it, and it's really interesting. A lot of it is changing, and not necessarily for the better. I think you can't just expect the audiences and the artists to keep coming year after year if it is becoming more and more expensive. It's not just a given that they will come, because they have to sacrifice so much to do it. And it's interesting the way that it combats that. And one of the ways I think is more and more bursaries and funds. And that is good on one sense, but you're still just splitting up, you're further making a bigger hierarchy within the Fringe, which is never what it was supposed to be. I think that there's a difference between putting your show into a box so that it can be marketed in sort of the most old-fashioned way on the Royal Mile, where you have 5 seconds to tell a passerby why they should come and see your show. I think that's great, and I think that teaches you so much. Why are you doing your show? Why should people care? That is really important. But then when you're sort of making the applications to these fund raising pots and bursaries, you are sterilizing the show, I think, sometimes, and that's hard. So I think that yes, bursaries and funds are really should continue and be more accessible, but then there should also just be a focus on trying to conquer the costs as a whole, and seeing if there are ways to alleviate that across the board, because yeah, it's not just a given.
Did the five of you need to put up a considerable amount of money yourselves?
We didn't all. Some of us did. Yeah, we put in around, I think last summer it was probably around 500 quid, two of us put in each. And we got a return on that, which was lucky. But that was just to pay the venue, and then the accommodation we had found quite cheaply, but it was still considerable. Luckily, for we managed to pay everyone back, and everyone got a bit of money as well. But it is such a gamble, and you never know what's going to happen.
No, I ask you the question though because I think one of the criticisms increasingly of theatre world these days is that there is so much less funding around that it is becoming more and more a place for people who have some kind of financial backing, and it's fantastic to see an adequate abridgment of life as a homo at a boarding school. There isn't the equivalent about life in a tower block because the person who would write that from direct experience might not be able to afford to get there, it would be argued.
Definitely.
The kind of sums of money that you've mentioned, £500 is an awful lot of money to somebody who's struggling to put food on the table this evening, but it's not a fortune. It isn't the sort of sums of money that couldn't be achieved by people with a real passion. In a sense, that kind of amount of money might feel encouraging to people. What are your thoughts on that?
I think my thoughts are it really depends. I think that if you are in the industry of this is what you do and what you want to do, then yes, that seems like a relatively worthwhile investment that for the chance of your show doing well and leading to future opportunities, then yeah. I mean we're this summer with one of the bigger venues, and the sort of venue cost of just having the venue for the whole month is about 5 grand, and that doesn't include accommodation or anything else. I think that figure, from varying perspectives, can discourage or encourage. I think that in this venue, of course encourages people to do this for the first time, that if you don't have Fringe experience, please apply. When I was looking at their programming inquiries and stuff, and I think that a first time Fringe are doing this, the concept of 5 grand and that is an accessible fee to pay is quite ridiculous, because that just all the costs that you incur when you're doing this, because assumingly no one's getting paid at this point, and so that means travel to wherever you're rehearsing, travel up to Edinburgh, then the accommodation, then the living costs. It does become a really costly venture, and has to be something that you have to be so confident and passionate in that you are going to succeed in. So it's a toss up, and I think that there's obviously the option of doing a shorter run, which might not be as expensive, but then your opportunities off the back of that, you might be less likely to get recognised, and so it's a tricky one, and I think that it needs a lot of time and attention being paid towards how this can be negated. I think when you're competing with the bigger shows that do just have that extra level of juice to put into the marketing and everything. I think it was interesting last year, TikTok became the partner of Edinburgh Fringe last year. And I always thought that was so interesting, because it was kind of, Edinburgh Fringe is kind of like the old-fashioned TikTok, where it's all this there's just so much content, and you can consume as much of it as you possibly can, and you can swipe up and ignore things and go and indulge in other things. And I think those are such different worlds, and obviously the Fringe is trying to position itself in the sort of in present culture, but it also needs to have a bit of integrity for what it stands for. It's a Fringe festival where anyone can perform, and so affirmative action to remain that is really necessary. And I think, probably at the moment, the number one thing is the accommodation. Let's get creative. Let's find a creative solution to this problem, because there must be one. It can't just keep going up like this. Otherwise, it's just not going to be feasible for many more people.
So part of the reason that you're in a bigger venue this year is because last year was such a success. That is to do with, you had a very good recommendation in the Scotsman. It was one of the best 5 shows on the Fringe. Your marketing was very good. You were all out there on the Royal Mile encouraging people to attend. You did all the right things, but you have a really good product that has been picked up and done well, and has since been on a national tour. How did that come about? Are you surprised at the level of success you've had, which has been really good? And to what do you attribute it?
We were all really surprised. I think that it happened so quickly at Edinburgh. The Scotsman article came out, I think, sort of day four of the Fringe, and so it just happened so quickly. I think it's just a sort of it just is that was like a perfect set of circumstances that for whatever reason that Scotsman reviewer had made a point of it to come early to one of our early shows, and then clearly when they were deliberating what was going to go in this opening weekend list of the top five things, that he had put our case forward and championed the show. I think that there's one element to it where I think I knew I was writing it for Fringe. I knew what Fringe shows I liked. I knew that, in this hour-long format, something exciting needed to happen and needed it to be funny, needed to be able to like the character. But, that was all kind of quite open. And it is really the addition of an amazing team that are very tasteful in their sort of approach to things because they know what they like and they make their decisions based off of that. And boarding school is one of those things that's very well known, as very well understood concept in this country. And we aren't trying to trick anyone into the fact that that isn't the setting or hide it in a bit of subterfuge. It's quite low hanging fruit, really. And in that, there's just a lot of space for being engaging, being funny, being witty, and maybe being a bit insightful about the hypocrisies there. I think it gets people talking, and that is the biggest thing you can do at Edinburgh to sell more tickets. Is that I think that 10 minutes after someone comes to see a show, that is the most crucial time, because in that 10 minutes, if they tell someone else, if they text someone, if they put it on their Instagram story, if they come out of it feeling good and share that sort of knowledge with other people, you then get more audiences. Even though it's such a big festival, it's so small like that, in that it just takes that sort of trickling for that to happen. So yeah, I think that a combination of all of those things. But yes, it was a complete surprise. We are used to showing theatre to our friends and family, and that was pretty much what we expected from this show. There was one show where we got sent a letter from a girl who had come to see the show on a field trip with her school from America, and it was a boarding school. And they'd come on a field trip to the Edinburgh Fringe, and they'd come to see the show. And so she left us a letter, and she told us how she empathised with the character of Johnny, that a lot of his circumstances were the circumstances that she was going through, and she was just really grateful that she'd been able to see it. And that was wild. And I think it remains the wildest thing that's happened, even though it was quite intimate and personal, because had really not thought that heavily about strangers seeing the show or even being affected by the show. And to the point that they send a letter is so, so bizarre. And yeah, that's the bit that still is the most sort of rewarding, I think, and still surprising.
Which is great. And so you've played Bristol, Manchester, and London recently. I saw the show again in London. You sold out, I think, at Waterloo East. They put on extra dates. Were they different audiences? Did it feel different to the audience that you have at the Edinburgh Festival?
Yes, I would say it was definitely an older demographic, and that was really interesting. What bits were like hit comedically, what hit dramatically. Yeah, I mean, the audiences were quite sort of became more and more diverse in that sense of people who were loyal to the theatre that saw this on the website and were like, oh, we're going to come along to that. That's the bit that we're learning to have confidence in now as a team and as a small theatre company, is that like if we market it well we can tap into those audiences who will have no idea who we are, have not received any prior recommendation, but they find us through marketing or the theatre's website or wherever it is, and they will come. And we've got to trust in that and push for that. So yeah, that's something that we're kind of trying to learn at the moment.
So finally, you've had this great success. I'm sure it will be a success again in Edinburgh this year. You've just graduated. Can't believe that you wrote this play at 16, but you did. You're now 22. You act, you write, you produce. What are you going to do next?
I would like to keep writing because I need something else to do over the summer, and assume I'm preempting a more boring job in September after Fringe is finished. So I would need something to focus on, and I haven't really written very much since this play, and I'd like to look at not using pure personal experiences as inspiration. So I'd like to write that, and I think I will more often than not write for gay experience. It's what I'm interested in watching. It's what the kind of artist that I want to collaborate with. I think, yeah, just for my writing, I think that will remain what I look to. But I'm looking forward to getting back into producing. I've sort of tried to dip my toe into helping Lizzie produce this show, but I don't do a very good job because I find it too conflicting. So yeah, I kind of leave that to her, but I'm looking forward to picking up. I think there's so much fun picking up someone else's work and producing it. We want to keep going as a team, whether that's continuing to produce this show for as long as we can, or finding something else or other people. That I think is what we are all looking towards. But we don't know. There's, we all we have to go on is each other's motivation. We have no funding, no sort of time frame of when we can, no guarantees. So yeah, we just got to keep allowing ourselves to do it and keep finding the time.
It is noticeable that you talked passionately about writing, mentioned producing, and didn't mention acting. Does that kind of reflect your levels of engagement with each, or was that?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I do love acting, and I love performing the show, and I've loved acting my whole life. I'm never just going to purely be an actor, though. I think I'd rather do something else entirely if I just had to be an actor, because I understand. I feel like I can gauge the craft of it and understand how you can apply yourself to that craft, but it's not overwhelmingly interesting to me. It's overwhelmingly interesting for me to watch and see other people engage with, but I think that I like to have too much control to just be an actor. And yeah, but I will never not want to keep acting. It's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Well, look, that's been fantastic. One last plug for the show again in Edinburgh this year. If at the point that you're listening to it is pre-Edinburgh 2025, please go and see it. It's really good. And yeah, thank you, Ned, for joining us on From There to Here.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was so kind for having me. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure.